Jack Murray wasn't a man easily rattled. A retired civil engineer from northern Montana, he'd spent years designing public infrastructure, bridges, dams, the occasional highway bypass, and just as many years dreaming of the day he could disappear into nature. That day came 5 years ago, when he bought a quiet lakeside cabin nestled in the pines, no HOA, no traffic, and only one way in, a narrow, wood-framed bridge his late father built in the 70s. He maintained it himself, paid for repairs out of pocket, and never gave it a second thought. Until now, Jack's truck rolled slowly down the winding trail, fishing gear in the back, and the smell of wet pine filling the air. The lake was barely a quarter mile ahead. He'd just come back from visiting his daughter out in Spokane, ready for 3 days of silence, fresh trout, and coffee on the deck. But something was off. The first sign came literally just past the bend. There, bolted to a post that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago, was a bright aluminum placard. It looked fresh, machine cut, stamped with official-looking words, "Private access, cabin entry prohibited, HOA Regulation 1 for B." Jack hit the brakes. Dust kicked up behind him. He stepped out, walked to the sign, and ran a hand across. The metal, still warm from the sun. Someone had taken their time placing it exactly at eye level. Someone who thought they had authority here. Except they didn't. Jack wasn't part of any HOA. The cabin sat on his own parcel, outside their boundaries. Always had. The road they just tried to claim crossed his family's land and terminated at his bridge, which he owned outright, down to the iron bolts in the foundation. Still, someone clearly believed otherwise. He walked the rest of the path on foot, eyes scanning. Near the trailhead, he found another sign zip-tied to a tree. This one was more aggressive. Nitrogen monoxide and unauthorized vehicles beyond this point subject to fines. Beneath it, a laminated letter flapped in the breeze. Jack pulled it down. It was addressed to resident. It claimed he was violating the HOA's community agreement for shoreline continuity. It warned of penalties, escalating enforcement, and possible legal action. No name, just a stamp. Lakeside Serenity HOA Board. Jack raised an eyebrow. That was new. Back in his truck, he opened the glove compartment and found an old envelope labeled deed. It was his original purchase agreement. He flipped to the last page and traced his finger across the boundary lines. His property, his bridge, his road. It was all still his. But someone had made a mistake. A bold one. As he drove the last stretch to his cabin, he spotted unfamiliar tire tracks in the dirt. They veered off toward the shoreline, near the bridge's support posts. Jack parked and followed the marks. They led to a flattened patch of grass, where it looked like someone had set up surveying gear. He stood there a long time, hands in his pockets, thinking, the last time anyone had touched this land without permission. He was a teenager. Back then, it was a logging company that crossed his father's boundary line. His dad had handled it with a calm phone call, a land survey, and a quiet lawsuit that ended with a check and an apology. Jack had inherited his father's patience, but not his tolerance. The following morning, Jack drove into town and asked a few quiet questions. Turns out the Lakeside Serenity HOA had been newly formed 2 months earlier. Their president, a woman named Karen Dillard, loud, and obsessed with community standards. According to a hardware store clerk, she'd already fined a neighbor for having a red mailbox and scolded another for planting tomatoes too close to the trail. Jack didn't say much. He simply bought a fresh lock to signs of his own, and a thick chain designed for heavy gate closure. Stopped by sunset. The aluminum HOA sign had been removed. Jack's own message now hung in its place. Bridge under review, access restricted until further notice. As darkness settled over the lake, Jack stood at the midpoint of the bridge. Hands behind his back, he looked out across the water at the soft lights of the nearby homes. They thought they'd blocked him from his cabin. They didn't realize he was the one blocking them in. Karen Dillard stood barefoot on her newly landscaped patio, staring at the lake with a glass of white wine in hand. She'd just finished dictating another HOA memo, this one about garden gnome height limits, when her eyes caught something that still irked her. The weather-brown cabin across the water dot to her. It was an eyesore from the moment she moved into lakeside serenity. Karen had a vision: uniformity, clean lines, paddleboard meetups, HOA-approved deck colors, and perfectly trimmed hedges. But that old cabin with its rusty tin roof and crooked porch swing, it didn't belong, not in her community. It was a stubborn relic of the past, untamed, unregulated, and worse. Outside the HOA's control. Until now, Karen had recently discovered something she believed was her golden ticket. The dirt road that led to Jack's cabin snaked along what she thought was part of the HOA's green space. She reviewed maps, old plats, and consulted with Doug Peterman, the HOA's self-appointed property survey specialist, who once worked for a landscaping company. Doug pointed at a blurry photocopy and nodded. Yeah, that's common area. That was all the confirmation Karen needed. She'd made her move while Jack was away visiting family. Ordered signs printed, authorized access restrictions. Sent out a newsletter titled, "Protecting Our Lakeside Image." She wrote in flowery language about property values, safety concerns, and unapproved exterior structures, thinly veiled shots at Jack's solar panels and firewood stack. When neighbors asked if that included the man who'd owned the land before the subdivision even existed, Karen smiled and waved them off. "We're just cleaning things up," she said. But by Monday morning, her plans started to wobble. The HOA's email inbox filled with questions. Why had the main access road been blocked? Wasn't that bridge privately owned? Karen ignored them. She figured it would blow over. People always complained until they got used to things. But then she received the photo. It came from Brian, the guy with the drone, who fancied himself a real estate photographer. He'd flown it over the bridge at sunset, trying to get a dramatic lake shot for the HOA's new brochure. Instead, he'd captured something that made Karen nearly drop her wine glass. There, on the bridge's iron gate, hung a bold, unmistakable sign: "Bridge under review, access restricted." A heavy chain coiled through the gate like a warning. Karen didn't like being challenged. She marched into the HOA office the next day, really just a repurposed bedroom in her house, and called an emergency meeting. Doug arrived first, already sweating. Trish followed, her purse full of expired coupons and unshakable loyalty. Brian came too, carrying his drone and a head full of nervous energy. Karen explained the situation in clipped tones. "This man Jack thinks he's above community guidelines. That cabin of his, it drags down the whole neighborhood. If he won't comply, we'll push him out. Legally." Doug raised a hand. "But the bridge. I heard from Tom in Lot 6 that Jack's family built it. Said it was their private access." Karen stiffened. "That bridge crosses association-maintained drain. We regulate access now." Brian frowned. "What if he sues?" Karen stared at him. "Then we countersue." Silence fell. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower buzzed. She stood. "We've established order here. Families moved in because of the structure we provide. If we let one rogue cabin ignore the rules, we lose control." Doug shifted in his chair. "What if we've already lost it?" Karen dismissed the comment with a wave. "We'll file a formal letter of complaint. If he refuses to remove the signage, we escalate. What Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Jack had already anticipated this, and he wasn't just waiting. He was gathering records, deeds, survey, maps with red ink underlines, and a notarized clause buried in the county archives that gave him the right to restrict access for maintenance, liability, or personal discretion, no matter what a newly formed HOA believed. That night, as the sun sank behind the pines, Karen walked the trail near the bridge herself, trying to see what made Jack's cabin so special. To her, it still looked like junk. But beneath the rusted roof, warm light flickered from inside, and the faint sound of jazz drifted across the water. Karen squinted, unimpressed, but she didn't realize she was already standing on land that didn't belong to her. Jack didn't storm into any offices. He didn't pound on doors or shout across neighborhood meetings. That wasn't his style. When something challenged him, he responded the way any seasoned engineer would, by going to the source, confirming the facts, and checking what people forgot to read. So he went to the place most people in town avoided, the dusty third-floor records room of the county clerk's office. The clerk behind the counter. Carol barely looked up from her crossword puzzle when Jack asked for archived land ownership files. But when he gave his last name and explained what he was looking for, her expression changed. "Oh," she said, flipping through a logbook. "That's the Murray Bridge. Built it with my dad when I was 16, Jack said. Carol stood and disappeared into a back room lined with beige filing cabinets that looked like they hadn't moved since the Nixon era. A few minutes later, she returned with a thick manila envelope, already labeled in faded ink. "Murray, Private Easement Agreement, 1977. Jack opened it on the spot. Inside were stamped maps, hand-drawn surveys, and a legally recorded easement agreement giving the Murrays not only ownership of the bridge, but sole authority to permit access to it. There was even a clause written in neat typewriter font, said structure and all egress rights therein shall be retained in perpetuity by original property owner and direct transferee, including maintenance closure rights, without external approval." In plain terms, the bridge was his. Jack took a deep breath and smiled. He asked for certified copies of the documents and had Carol notarize a summary sheet. Then he drove straight to his old storage unit on the edge of town. After an hour of digging through crates, he found what he needed: his father's surveyor kit, still packed with stakes, tape, and boundary markers. By the time the sun dipped low that evening, Jack was back at the bridge, measuring lines in the dirt, placing small colored flags where property lines ran, each flag marked where the HOA's claim ended and where his land began. And by morning, he was ready. He installed two motion-triggered trail cameras on the trees lining the bridge approach. Then he posted a sign, not flashy, not aggressive, just factual: private bridge, not part of HOA jurisdiction, documented access controlled. Below it, he attached a laminated copy of the deed summary. At first, he'd been jogging the trail with his new beagle, hoping to avoid horror drama for once. When he stopped dead in front of the sign, he read it twice, frowned, and took a photo. Within 20 minutes, the image was in Karen's inbox. She barely blinked before forwarding it to her personal lawyer. "Tell me this doesn't mean anything," she wrote, but the response didn't come back the way she expected. Jack was ready for this moment, too. When Karen's attorney reached out with a politely veiled cease and desist letter, Jack responded with a neatly organized email. He attached scans of the original 1977 bridge deed, the easement agreement, a copy of the legal parcel map from the county surveyor's office, and even a statement from Carol confirming the bridge's private ownership status. The email ended with a single sentence, "Please advise your client to consult the boundary lines." Before issuing further restrictions, silence followed for 3 days. Then something curious happened. The HOA's website removed all references to shoreline beautification. A planned cleanup event near Jack's property was quietly cancelled, and residents received a vague notice that access regulations are currently under review pending clarification of local infrastructure ownership. But Jack knew Karen wasn't finished. Not yet. That same week, he noticed unfamiliar tire tracks near his mailbox. A drone hovered near his cabin for a full 10 minutes. He found one of his property flags yanked out of the ground and tossed near the ditch. Jack didn't respond with noise. He responded by sealing the bridge gate with a double lock and welding a steel pin through the hinge. No one crossed without his say-so. And now, he had the paperwork to back it up. He didn't want to be the bad guy. He wasn't even angry, but the rules weren't his problem anymore. He just knew how to read them better than they did. The sun rose over the lake with the kind of stillness Jack appreciated. The birds were early. The breeze was quiet, and not a single car had crossed the bridge yet. That was about to change. Jack moved carefully, like someone setting the final piece of a plan he'd measured to the inch. He pulled the heavy steel chain from the back of his truck, looped it through the iron gate posts on the bridge, and tightened the padlock with a satisfying click. Then, without a word, he unfolded a metal stand and mounted a fresh sign above. The lock, bridge access closed for safety inspection, duration undetermined. He didn't need to explain anything else. According to the documents, he was legally allowed to conduct safety reviews and restrict access during maintenance whenever he saw fit. Back at the cabin, Jack poured himself coffee and waited. By 7:42 a.m., the first SUV pulled up to the bridge. It was Trish, HOA's little lapdog, late for her Tuesday yoga class. She tapped the gas twice, confused, then rolled her window down to read the sign. She pulled out her phone, dialed someone, and started gesturing wildly at the gate. 10 minutes later, Doug arrived. He got out of his car, crouched near the base of the sign, and tried to see if there was a hidden mechanism. Jack watched from his deck chair, sipping from his mug. Amused. By 8:15 a.m., traffic had backed up down the dirt road. There were a dozen cars now, boxed in with nowhere to turn around. People leaned out windows, horns honked. Confused residents started calling the HOA hotline. And finally, just before 9, Karen arrived. She pulled up in her silver crossover, sunglasses perched high on her head and a clipboard in her lap. She stepped out with all the ceremony of a mayor arriving to inspect a crime scene. She pushed her way through the crowd and stood at the locked gate, reading Jack's sign with tight lips. Then she marched straight up to it and shook the chain. "Illegal," she muttered. "Completely illegal." Jack let her stay there a moment before walking down from his cabin and approaching calmly. Coffee still in hand. Karen spun to face him. "You can't just close the bridge. That's public access. This road services multiple homes. You're blocking community infrastructure." Jack took a slow sip. "It's not public. The bridge is private. Documented. Safety inspections. Overdue. I've got paperwork. If you need it." Karen narrowed her eyes. "You can't make that call on your own." "I'm not," Jack replied. "I made it with the county. The liability's mine. If someone falls through a plank, it's my problem. So until the bridge is inspected, no one crosses." Someone behind her muttered, "Wait, he owns the bridge." Jack looked past Karen. Several residents were listening now, some with folded arms, others clearly questioning everything they'd been told. Karen stepped forward. "If this doesn't open in the next hour, I'll be calling law enforcement." Jack pulled a folded document from his pocket and handed it to her. She snatched it and scanned the front page. Bridge ownership, easement agreement, liability waiver, and county code for private structure maintenance. Jack said, "I can close it for a month if I feel like it." Karen didn't respond right away. Her jaw worked silently. Jack leaned in, voice even. "Tell your lawyer to read the footnotes this time." Then he turned and walked back toward his cabin, leaving her in the dust. The next few hours unfolded like a strange neighborhood festival. Residents gathered by the bridge, some setting up folding chairs, others calling friends to figure out if this was real. More than a few looked irritated, but not all at Jack. Many were already whispering about Karen, asking if she'd overreached. Again. By that evening, drone footage of the blocked bridge was circulating on social media. One teenager posted a video titled, "Old Guy Shuts Down Entire Horror with One Lock," and it was racking up views fast. Jack didn't post anything. He didn't need to. He simply sat on his porch, the bridge locked behind him, listening to the rustle of trees and the occasional distant car honking in frustration. Karen had tried to cut off his access, but she had forgotten who really held the keys. The bridge stayed locked for 3 full days. By the end of day 1, Karen had already sent out to whore-wide emails, one urging calm, the other filled with vague threats of imminent legal action. By day 2, she was on the phone with the county commissioner's office, trying to report Jack for deliberately obstructing community function, but they'd already seen the paperwork. Jack had beat her to it. Day 3, that was when desperation turned creative. Karen summoned the horror board to her backyard for what she called a tactical strategy session. Folding chairs surrounded her. Fire pit. Doug brought maps. Trish brought banana bread. Brian had his drone footage queued up on a tablet. Karen began with a mission statement. "We cannot allow a single homeowner to control the community's mobility. This is not just about one bridge, it's about setting a precedent. We must reclaim access." Doug looked doubtful. "What if we've already lost it?" Karen smacked the arm of her chair. "No. We find an alternate route." That's when Trish chimed in with an idea. The trail behind Lot 17, which curved round the lake and connected to a forgotten utility road on the other side. "Technically," she said, "if we cut through the edge of the woods and cross Peterson's field, we could bypass Jack's bridge completely." Karen lit up. "That's it. Emergency trail access. We'll install temporary signs, carve a path, and let people know we're not hostage to one man." The next morning, orange cones marked a makeshift path through the brush. Signs were posted. "Emergency community access, trail in progress." Volunteers appeared with weed whackers and shovels. But their shortcut dream died just as fast, because Peterson's field, that didn't belong to the whore Peterson anymore. He'd sold it last year to Jack. The man had quietly purchased the land months earlier to prevent development behind his cabin. A smart move. And now, it also meant he owned the only viable detour the whore thought they had. Jack didn't yell or grandstand. He simply walked down to the cones, picked one up, and handed it to a startled volunteer. "Wrong property," he said. Word spread faster than the trail had been cut. That evening, Karen received a hand-delivered envelope with a polite notice. "Unauthorized trail work on privately owned land must cease immediately. Continued activity will be reported as trespassing." She read it twice, crushed the paper, and stormed into her garage. By now, whispers were spreading throughout the neighborhood. A few residents had begun questioning the HOA dues. Others started combing through bylaws they'd never read before. And one man on the corner, Greg, A former city planner sent out a PDF titled "Know Your Property Lines" to everyone on the mailing list. At the same time, Jack stayed calm, deliberate. He sent no threats, no counters. He just acted quietly. And then he made one more move. He sent an official notice to the HOA's legal counsel, informing them that the lakefront clubhouse, which they used for meetings and events, sat partially on land leased from a parcel he co-owned. The original agreement had expired 2 months ago. The previous owner had allowed the use for free. Jack, he hadn't decided yet. Karen's panic reached a new level. The HOA's 4th of July barbecue, monthly wine tasting, and toddler swim club were all scheduled at that clubhouse, and now Jack held the key to that too. Inside the next emergency board meeting, Karen lost her composure. "This is a siege," she snapped. "He's intentionally dismantling our ability to operate." Brian hesitated before speaking. "He hasn't broken a single law," Trish added. "Honestly, maybe we pushed too far." Karen stared at them, stunned. The tide was shifting. Meanwhile, Jack prepared something else. He drafted a community letter, not inflammatory, not bitter, just factual. It laid out the ownership history of the bridge, explained the risks of unauthorized access, and invited any concerned neighbor to reach out directly with questions. By the time the bridge reopened, a quiet understanding had settled over the neighborhood. The gate didn't swing wide, it clicked open for those who'd registered with Jack. Everyone else, they waited or walked out, and Karen, her code never worked. The HOA wasn't used to losing. For years, residents followed the rules with robotic compliance, fence heights, mailbox colors, even the number of bird feeders allowed per yard. Karen had built a community of quiet obedience. But the bridge changed everything. It was the first time someone challenged her, not just in whispers, but with force, paperwork, and complete control over the only road in. And people were watching. After the failed trail attempt and the locked-out clubhouse fiasco, the HOA board scrambled to keep order. But something had shifted. Residents began showing up at meetings not to listen but to question. "Why weren't we told the bridge wasn't ours? Did you check the property records before posting signs? Are we being sued, or are we the ones doing the suing?" Karen deflected, smiled tightly, and used phrases like temporary disruption and strategic negotiation. But no one believed her anymore. At the same time, Jack was doing the opposite. He didn't hide. He wasn't loud either. He just started making himself available. One weekend, he set up a folding table at the entrance to the bridge with coffee, water, and a stack of printed documents. Not confrontational, not flashy, just facts. He invited people to come talk if they had questions. They came. Older couples curious about the land ownership maps, younger families frustrated by HOA dues. A woman named Cheryl who admitted she'd voted for Karen, but regretted it the moment she got fined for her hammock color. Jack didn't give speeches. He answered calmly. He let people see the paperwork. One guy joked it felt like sitting with a friendly librarian who also knew how to weld a gate shut. By the end of the afternoon, the HOA email inbox was full of residents demanding transparency. Someone asked for a full audit of how decisions have been made in the past 6 months. Karen went silent for a week. Then came the video. Thought it wasn't Jack's doing. A teenager named Zoe, who lived near the end of the road, had posted a TikTok, a 2-minute clip of Karen yelling at a group of residents near the clubhouse, waving a clipboard, demanding they stop conspiring with that man. The caption read, "How Karen loses it over a bridge she doesn't own." It went viral overnight. Local news picked it up. A YouTube commentator did a reaction video. People from out of state started commenting on the HOA's Facebook page, asking for bridge updates. For Jack, it was surreal. He didn't want fame. He just wanted peace. But he understood something now. Karen's authority wasn't built on law. It was built on no one questioning her. And once people started asking, it all came apart. Even the board began to waver. Doug stopped showing up to meetings. Trish resigned quietly, citing health reasons. Brian, to everyone's shock, posted a video on the HOA's official page admitting the drone footage showed that the signs had been placed illegally and that Jack's bridge ownership was clear. Karen called it betrayal. Others called it overdue. Meanwhile, the gate still stood. Jack added a keypad, modern and weatherproof. Residents who spoke to him, who were respectful and honest, received unique access codes. Those who didn't, well, they waited. Karen's code never came. One morning, she stood at the keypad again, punching in numbers. Nothing. She tried different combinations, even used her birthday. Still locked. She called Jack, left a voicemail, then another. He didn't answer. She showed up in person the next evening. Just as Jack was lighting his porch lantern, she stood just beyond the gate, looking tired for the first time since the whole mess started. "You're making a point," she said. "But this isn't sustainable." Jack stared at her. "Neither was pretending you ran this land." Karen folded her arms. "You've proven your point." Jack looked out at the lake. "I haven't even started." She left without another word. By week's end, a petition was circulating among residents requesting a full re-election of the HOA board and a review of its authority. For the first time, Karen had real opposition. And it wasn't just Jack. It was the neighborhood. Karen wasn't built for defeat. She came from a background of PTA power moves and homeowner association handbooks thick enough to stop a bullet. Losing to Jack quiet, deliberate, and moved Jack was something she couldn't process, though she escalated. It began with a letter, neatly formatted, printed on HOA letterhead, and slipped under Jack's cabin door. Notice of civil complaint pending. The letter accused Jack of willfully obstructing community infrastructure, interfering with resident rights, and intentionally damaging the HOA's reputation. At the bottom, a smug signature, Karen Dillard, President. Jack read it twice, folded it neatly, and placed it beside his coffee pot. The very next morning, his response arrived at Karen's mailbox in a certified envelope. It was 36 pages long. Inside were copies of the original bridge deed, the land parcel overlays, the 1977 easement agreement, and a notarized document from the county assessor confirming that neither the road nor the bridge had ever transferred to public or association ownership. The final page was a formal cease and desist filed through Jack's attorney demanding the HOA retract all claims within 5 business days or face a lawsuit of their own for harassment, property interference, and defamation. Karen's hands shook as she read it, but she didn't back down. The HOA filed suit first, demanding a judge compel Jack to unlock the bridge permanently and grant unrestricted community access. Karen was sure she had the moral high ground. "This is about unity," she told anyone who'd listen. "He's just one man. We are a community." But the courtroom didn't care about slogans. It cared about land rights. The case was heard in the small courthouse on the edge of town. The room was full, neighbors packed in the back row, some silently rooting for Jack, others too embarrassed to admit they had once signed Karen's petitions. Jack didn't bring a lawyer from the city. He brought a local, a quiet, sharp-minded man named Harold Denton, an old friend and semi-retired land rights attorney who'd once helped Jack's father file the original easement paperwork. He wore a bolo tie and read from yellowed legal code with precision. Karen brought in a firm from 2 counties over. Clean suits, iPads, plenty of eye rolls. It didn't matter. Jack's team came prepared. They showed the court the bridge's original build permit, dated 3 years before the HOA's existence. They submitted the maintenance records, all signed and paid out of Jack's own pocket. They revealed that the HOA's own developer had exempted Jack's parcel in the original incorporation filings. But the real nail in the coffin came from the digital evidence. As discovery unfolded, Jack's attorney produced a folder of emails obtained legally after HOA members began forwarding them. They revealed a pattern. Karen had instructed the board to vote on new rules by private email, skipping the official quorum process. She had even forged digital signatures on at least 2 access enforcement documents. One email stood out. He doesn't attend meetings. He has no say. Once we block him in, he'll fold like the others. That was the moment everything shifted. The judge leaned forward. Did you, at any point, attempt to verify whether the defendant's property was included in your association jurisdiction? Karen stammered. We interpreted the map in the HOA charter as inclusive of community usage. The judge raised an eyebrow. But the charter doesn't name the parcel, and the land deed clearly excludes it. Silence filled the room. Judgment came fast. The case was dismissed. Not only that, the HOA was fined $35.00 in legal damages and administrative fees for frivolous litigation and unauthorized enforcement. The judge ordered that any further action against Jack would be considered harassment. Karen didn't speak as she left the courtroom. But Jack didn't leave right away. Outside the courthouse, reporters from a local station asked him how he felt. He simply looked at the camera and said, "I just wanted to fish." They brought the rest on themselves. That night, Karen's driveway was empty. Her porch lights were off. A quiet hush settled across the whole leadership. But Jack wasn't done, because earlier that morning, while Karen was preparing her courtroom speech, Jack had signed one more document, an application to reclaim old right-of-way running straight through the HOA's back park. No one saw that coming, and the next chapter would make the bridge look like a warm-up. 3 weeks after the courtroom clash, Lakeside Serenity looked different. The HOA board was fractured. Karen hadn't shown her face at a single meeting since the judge's ruling. Residents whispered about a quiet real estate agent slipping in and out of her home, about boxes being packed behind closed blinds. Even her husband's prized golf cart vanished from the driveway overnight. But the real shift wasn't Karen disappearing. It was Jack building something. It started with survey flags. Then came the construction stakes. A small crew in orange vests showed up one morning with shovels and a backhoe, digging just past the old utility shed at the far end of the HOA's Central Park. By the 3rd day, rumors were everywhere. Jack's building a new road. He bought the land behind the park. I heard he's putting up a fence around the whole back trail. No one knew for sure until the sign went up. Private right-of-way restoration in progress. Entry by permission only. The board's new interim president, a retired librarian named George, tried to clarify the situation at a town hall meeting. He read from a prepared statement. But even he couldn't hide the awkward truth. Jack had filed a claim to reopen a long-abandoned access road that cut through the edge of HOA-controlled common space. His claim was legal, filed with the county, and based on a little-known 1981 easement his father had secured then never used. Until now, Jack wasn't reclaiming the past. He was paving a way forward, quite literally. By the end of the week, the back end of the park had a gravel access lane to lampposts. and a solar-powered keypad gate mirroring the one he'd installed at the bridge. It wasn't flashy. It was clean, purposeful, and locked. Only Jack had the master code. At first, people grumbled. Then they realized something quietly unsettling. The HOA's clubhouse, dog park, and walking trail now sat boxed in by Jack's property. There were entrances, sure, but every path into those amenities now crossed land he controlled. Jack hadn't trapped anyone. He hadn't blocked access. He'd just surrendered it. George scheduled a meeting with Jack, hoping for cooperation, and Jack agreed on one condition: a new agreement, one that permanently acknowledged his exemption from the HOA, guaranteed his bridge and land rights, and gave him final say over any trail or access change that touched his parcels. He didn't want power, he just wanted it written down. Legally, permanently. Most of the board agreed. After the lawsuit and the fines, no one wanted another fight. Everyone except Karen. She made one last attempt. One foggy morning, just before the agreement was said to be signed, Karen showed up at Jack's gate. This time, there were no cameras, no clipboard, just her. She called through the bars. "You win? Is that what you wanted?" Jack opened the gate remotely, and she walked up the gravel lane. "No," he said quietly. "I just wanted to be left alone." Karen looked older than she had weeks before, worn down, makeup faded, pride cracked. "People hate me now," she muttered. Jack raised an eyebrow. "They don't hate you, they just finally saw you." She nodded, almost like she agreed. "Why the second road?" she asked. Jack looked out toward the lake. "Because I'm too old to keep fighting over the only one." She didn't respond. She just turned and walked back the way she came, shoulders low, her heels crunching on the gravel she no longer had a say over. Later that week, the agreement was signed. Jack's land became officially off limits to any HOA claim, current or future. In return, Jack granted access through his new road for emergencies and events, but with conditions the board had to follow or risk immediate revocation. It was clean, it was fair, and it was over. Karen listed her house quietly and moved before the season changed. Jack stayed. The bridge stayed. So did the lantern that hung from the post at the top of the gravel road. If you look closely, you'd see a small brass plate mounted underneath it. It read, "This land respects the quiet." And on warm evenings, if the light was glowing and the music from Jack's cabin drifted across the lake, you knew the gate was still open for those who understood what it meant to share a shoreline without trying to own it all.